So in the last couple of days I've been talking about Kemeticism. In other words, ancient Egyptian religion. And for those who are new here, or in the very least haven't been around since the beginning, Kemeticism was one of the main things I started talking about at the beginning of my uploading history here. I kid you not when I say that Kemeticism was the biggest topic that granted me some semblance of notoriety in the witchy and occult community on this platform. It was the first playlist that I ever made here. And I think I just might put this video in that playlist. That way you can all go down memory lane with me, and you will see how far I've come. First of all, this is still the same haircut. Secondly, in the 3 years since then, I have learned how to work camera angles much better. A lot of those videos were from down here, and I often have a cigarette in my hand and I'm like stroking my chin, and my facial expressions were so freaking forced. I mean, honestly, it's not much better now. The difference is I've been doing it long enough that way it feels just a little bit more natural. But I spent so much time talking about Sutekh. I spent so much time trying to make sure that I did the right thing and curate my words the right way. And at some point, I just kind of got fucking sick of myself. And at some point, I had convinced myself that I didn't know how quite to handle it. And honestly, I didn't. I was walking around calling myself a priestess of Sutekh or a priestess in training, and I was speaking from a point of understanding even though I myself was still learning. And for fuck's sake, I am still learning. But if nothing else, it is proof that I've come a long way since then. But at the same time, demons and Greek deities felt a lot more accessible, felt a lot more popularly eclectic. And absolutely they are. 'Cause let us not forget, Egypt is a part of Africa. And although they are an Arabic nation now, although historically speaking, Egypt very much has been multicultural. But the history of Egypt is very old, and it wasn't always that way. And there are so many things that to this day, it really feels like it's not my place to speak on. Look at me. I'm clearly not a descendant of that region. But in the last couple of days, I realize just how much I miss this religion, this philosophy, the history of Egypt itself. And there are so many things that I have yet to learn. There are more blind spots than I have clear vision. But I've spent some time with a couple of Kemetic deities in the last couple of days, and I am willing to admit that I fucking missed it. So I don't know what this video was supposed to mean, other than inviting you to go down memory lane with me. So, you want to know what are some offerings for Set? This will be 2 parts. His favorite colors are red and gold, so red things, such as this red lighter, or this red lighter. Things that are gold, even if they are fake gold, like this plate that I use for offering to him. Spicy foods and spicy snacks. He loves buffalo sauce and buffalo wings, as well as flaming hot Cheetos. His favorite stone that I am aware of is red jasper. See how I have one for him here, and I have one for him here. The dude loves sand, especially if you can get the red sand from his native lands in Egypt. Strawberry is handed to him upside down. There's a story behind that. Dark liquor, dark coffee, dark beers and ales. And his favorite food of all time, lettuce, particularly romaine lettuce. Like for part 2! Non-traditional offerings that I have learned through unverified personal gnosis. He loves all kinds of heavy music, particularly deathcore. Thy Art is Murder, the Hate album, is one of his favorite albums that I have come to learn. Notice a very similar color palette with the things associated with him on my altar. Considering CJ McMahon is also a goofy motherfucker, I would not be surprised if Set is his patron. He also really enjoys sci-fi. Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke, I have come to learn, is one of his favorite books. My experience with him, he is a gigantic Whovian. I have the Doctor's Fob Watch hanging an offering to him. He also really likes violent/intelligent anime. I've also come to learn that he also really likes Coca-Cola. Good Omens is another one of his favorites. Non-menthol cigarettes, particularly of the Marlboro brand. Like for more super... not tripping. They're offerings for Set, my patron. And the plate that they were on is an offering plate specifically for him. Set, or Sutekh, really likes spicy stuff. And he told me that people get him the crunchy hot Cheetos a lot, but never really the flamin' hot fries. And I had an extra $2.50, so I said, why not? You really don't need to go broke giving offerings to your deities. Yes, all of these offerings are also correct. He prefers romaine lettuce. He accepts sand as offering, but he prefers the red sands of Egypt. His love for gaudy blingy things is exactly why this plate, which is actually a party-like candle holder, is his offering plate specifically for him. The thing I find interesting is the phallic objects as offering. He's very well known for being extremely promiscuous as well as even hypersexual. But he's not a god of fertility. He's very specifically known for being infertile. Which makes me wonder about something on my altar. This rainbow obsidian obelisk. I've never known 100% who it's supposed to be for. Now, if I may ask you both, is my suspicion correct? The answer was yes. It's literally a dick and ball joke. Oh my god, Set! It's literally a dick and ball joke. Oh my god, Set! Now, I want to talk about why I found that hilarious, and how I knew Set did it on purpose. The story takes place during a time where Horus and Set were still battling for the throne. The version of the story that is my personal favorite. In the midst of one of the challenges, with everybody watching, Set successfully seduced Horus. Realizing that everybody was watching, Horus reached back and ripped off his balls. Some versions of the story tell that his junk would grow back, or that he was presented with a new pair as a consolation prize. When his new pair came in, he went around bragging about how much better they were than the last pair. This is why I offer Set strawberries, upside down, and is exactly why some of us Set worshippers celebrate Valentine's Day as Set's Balls Day. Allow me to demonstrate. You see? And that is the god I worship.
So I heard if you boil lettuce and drink it like a tea, you'll end up in a coma.
Set, are you trying to tell me something? Have I really become that predictable? You're literally the only deity I know whose sign is lettuce. It's a very unique calling card. My lord. Well, shit, you got me there. Well, you have my attention now. What's up? What else would it mean? It means get some fucking rest. Just rest! Ah! Is that all? Motherfucker, have you seen yourself? I don't know what you're talking about. Tell me you're joking. Have you met me? Can you get me a Coke? Yeah.
I just want you for my own.
Please leave me the
There are Nazis that reach out to Set? Do these people not know the history of Sutekh? Set is a protector of foreigners, always has been, which is how he became the patron of the Hyksos when they settled around the Delta Nile between the 15 and 1600s BCE. Hyksos just means people of foreign lands. It was a blanket term. Most of the Hyksos were Semitic, nomadic settlers. Semitic. And he protected them. Sutekh is not a god for white super sissies. I just don't want to say the word out loud on recorded apps. So if there are any neo-Nazis who work with Set, it either isn't Set is working with them so he can hurt them, or he pities them and wants to bring them away from those ideals. Do I, Set?
My name is Lieutenant Aldo Rain, and I'm putting together a special team. We're going to be doing one thing, and one thing only. Killing Nazis.
Oh yeah, I'm aware of that one. I've even had other entities try to convince me of that. But as somebody who used to work with the Infernal Divine, I don't believe that. He does not feel like an infernal deity at all. This is why historical, cultural context is of the utmost importance. But with Set, it is particularly difficult because he did face one of the worst smear campaigns that I have personally ever seen. Top 3, definitely. And honestly, that's part of why I've taken it upon myself as part of my work with him to dig through a lot of that bullshit and pilfer through it, which includes studying the historical, cultural, religious context. So I've definitely immersed myself almost completely into Kemetic paganism, or Kemeticism. And I'm still learning, and a lot of it is through the lens of Set. But yeah, a lot of the propaganda and misinformation is why it can be difficult to work with Set. I'll be continuing to debunk this myth.
What is this?
That would be lettuce.
Lettuce? Lettuce?
Yes, Lord Set? Lettuce. Lettuce. You got any fucking lettuce? Is this a meme or are you asking? Lettuce. So the answer is both. Low-key, that doesn't make it less confusing or ominous. Lettuce. Okay, I'll get some fucking lettuce later, okay? Lettuce, 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 lettuce. Lettuce. Just in case you thought I was joking. Motherfucker loves lettuce. Dua Set! Elaborate on how Set is not the devil? Gladly. However, I speak of my own authority. As a person who has relied on research. This is going to be multiple parts. In the pre-dynastic eras of Kemet, Set was a deity associated with the nighttime, counterpart to Horus the Elder, or Heru were. Probably said that wrong. He protected people in the night as they traveled and as they slept. He was always associated with very peculiar things to happen in the desert, such as thunderstorms and earthquakes, even so much as associating him with lunar and solar eclipses. There are reliefs depicting Horus the Elder and Set elevating Osiris to be in the position we all knew him to have, patron of the pharaoh. It was with their blessing that Osiris had his position. Set took and protected the things that Egypt did not like, including redheads and various animals. Protecting. As other gods came to prominence in the dynastic era of ancient Egypt, Set was often seen as an outcast and a loner associated with the periphery of Egypt, like the red sands of Upper Egypt. Hence the red sand. And like the sands of Egypt, in the deserts were infertile, and so was he. But if you were to call on Set, it was believed that he would grant you with an oasis, relief from the desert. Set's sexual habits, such as being either bisexual or pansexual, as well as his infertility, were things seen as undesirable or just looked down upon or given funny looks by people of ancient Egypt. There's a habit here of him being associated with the things that the Egyptians didn't like, which is exactly why Set came to be associated with foreigners. He protected outcasts and rejects, which is how in the 16 and 1500s BCE he came to protect the Hyksos. This is where things get wonky. Hyksos is a blanket term. It refers to a group of Semitic nomadic settlers who were mostly of Canaanite origin. The Hyksos just means people of foreign lands. They took Set as their patron as they settled around the Nile Delta, the wellspring from which the Nile flowed. If it weren't for the Nile, Egypt would not have existed, at least the way that we know it. This created tension which bred animosity between the Hyksos and the people as well as the authority of Egypt. Most of the myths that we have about Set, especially him contending for the throne and killing Osiris, is a direct mirror image of the events going on in the lands at that time. This is where I'm currently researching exact detail. But exactly at the same time as the Hyksos were being pushed out of Egypt, Set's places of worship were being taken over and torn down. The faces of his statues were replaced with the faces of other gods, and Set would forever become demonized and turned into a villain. I'm going to have to phrase this part carefully. All of these previous events were what was handed to, on the surface level, to the Egyptologists and archaeologists that were excavating in the late 1800s and early 1900s. A lot of that information was not given context, the necessary historical, religious, and cultural context to make sense of what they were understanding and translating and discovering was lacking. In no way is this supposed to be advocating for some conspiracy. It was a bunch of people with colonizer mindset coming in with the excitement of new discovery, trying to publish as much as they could at once. And that can't be said for every Egyptologist then. But a lot of the works that we work our understanding upon is from that time or just copied from that time. New understandings are consistently being emerged. The history of Kemet and the understanding of Kemeticism is constantly evolving and changing, which is why we as Kemetic pagans have to dig deeper constantly. Now, when we take all of that information from the boom of Egyptology, those partly understood pieces of information were later discovered by Nazi-era Germany. Nazi-era Germany had a huge obsession with the occult. Something that they did that is still being done today, whether people realize it or not, is trying to cross-reference multiple different cultures. That's why I strongly advocate against syncretizing deities. A lot of that is actually built off the backs of the efforts of Nazi Germany, which, unbeknownst to a lot of people, is what a lot of the takes of New Age spirituality is actually based on, whether people realize it or not. But it was through overlapping and cross-analyzing that people found similarities between Set and the devil. Even so much as saying is that his 72 followers were the same as the 72 goetic demons. I don't buy that. So we can actually thank the Nazis for syncretizing Set with the devil. Fuck Nazis! You know, I'm glad to see you actively There's a disturbance in the Force. Another disturbance, my lord? Ah, this one's different. It's a familiar presence. Should I be concerned? Hello, dear. Oh, thank God it's just you. Oh. That laugh makes me feel like you know something. Well, where there is one, there will be the other. The other. Ah, that makes sense. She's here, isn't she? Oh, that's not all. Oh God, Loki, no! Good afternoon, Set. Oh God, why? You think this is funny? Oh, I told you they would show up. Fine, who else is here? Meow. Is that Bast? Set, that's just a cat. There were no pharaohs. There were no pharaohs? What is this? These are the people I'm talking about. There's a whole list of them right here. Now, yes, there were a lot of things that were understood through a Western lens, yes, but there were still kings and rulers, and these people are the people I'm talking about. Now, clearly not all of them regarded Usir as their patron. You know, Ramses II and Seti I took Set as their patron. Now, if you want to get down to the bare bones of it, yes, everything is made up. All words are just utterances and grunts to help us understand what the other person is talking about. Whatever the argument is, these are the people, the historic rulers in which I am talking about. These people existed. Okay, I say this with as much respect as I can. I do not mean to come at you or your beliefs. I'm not sure of everything you listed here, but I saw the name Brian Forrester. Are we talking about this guy? Brian Forrester. Brian Forrester has been featured in Ancient Aliens several times. I don't know much about Brian Forrester, but his affiliation with Ancient Aliens gives me some red flags. Do I believe in extraterrestrials? Oh, absolutely. And do I believe that they have been in communication with us? Absolutely. This is entertainment. On my channel, and in my life, I look at cultural, historical, religious context. The ancient astronaut theory has polluted and plagued mysticism and spirituality, and has actually created very many dangerous pieces of rhetoric. Suffice it to say, I do not believe that aliens have anything to do with my religion. Do I, Set? Are people really making fun of Anubis by saying he's just a doggo deity, or is that just something that Anubis devotees are using as a jumping point to praise Anubis? Either way, that's valid, but I have to ask. There are not many deities that genuinely intimidate me, and Anubis is one of them, and here's why. Forgive me, Lord Set, for the story I'm about to tell. Anubis is the protector of the dead, so he was protecting Osiris's dead body while Nephthys and Isis were going around trying to find the parts. Set took the form of a leopard and tried to sneak in to further desecrate the body. Set is renowned for his raw might and physical strength. Anubis gave 0 fucks, grabbed Set in his leopard form, and proceeded to skin him alive, then continued to wear his skin around as clothing, which is exactly why the priests of Anubis often wore leopard pelts. Anubis fucking scares me. Anubis gives 0 fucks. This comment fucking wins. This comment wins today. I haven't laughed this hard in a good long while. Wow. This just... mwah, beautiful. The award for funniest comment so far on that video goes to you, Desert Rose Goddess. Oh, fuck. I have no negative feelings for this commenter or the commented. I'm just using it as a jumping point. I do believe that it's entirely possible that people that work with him, he says to them it's okay to refer to him as doggo deity or something like that. In the context of people that are referring to him as, oh, doggo deity, it's because they're being disrespectful about it. Or they're trying to diminish the importance and the power of Anubis, and by doing that, they are minimizing the status, if you will, of the people who work with Anubis. Also, if you don't know a god, it's probably not best to throw jokes just in case. Get to know the deity first, and if they're okay with it, then they're okay with it. But that's between you and the deity. So, saying doggo deity, not necessarily a problem. It's the context in which you use it, and if that deity has specifically said it's okay for you to refer to them that way. The short answer is no. Kemetic paganism is not a closed practice. But to truly understand it and become a Kemetic pagan, you have to do your research. You gotta remember it's an African religion. You need to do historical and cultural research, otherwise the gods aren't gonna make sense. So history is of the utmost importance. And without understanding history, you're not gonna understand how many times the religion has been bastardized, crumpled up, misinterpreted. And now with a lot of modern takes, such as the ancient astronaut theory and a lot of modern New Age spirituality, people believe the gods are fucking aliens. And even if they were aliens, it's irrelevant to understand the religion. Because even if they are, you still have to adapt or in the very least understand the religious, historical, cultural context to make sense of the religion in which you are practicing and the gods you are worshipping. So is it closed? No. But you gotta do your research, you gotta learn the history. It's an undertaking. This comment makes me want to expand more, specifically on what I meant by respecting that Kemetic faith is an African religion. Kemeticism was not originally practiced by white people. If you do not already understand that the Egyptian gods have been hijacked by colonial white spirituality, then Kemeticism is not for you. If you are not willing to put in the time and effort to decolonize Kemetic faith and spirituality, then Kemeticism is not for you. If you have a problem with the word colonizer, Kemeticism is not for you. If you're not willing to put in the time and effort to learn and understand how ancient Egyptian people practiced the religion and how they worshiped their gods, then Kemeticism is not for you. You cannot ethically practice Kemetic spirituality while having a white mindset. I said what I said. Holy shit, you're absolutely correct. I need to add to that list. If you are not going to take the time to learn how Kemeticism is practiced today in Egypt, then Kemeticism is not for you. We need to remember that Kemeticism is still alive and well, being practiced in Egypt to this day. Outsiders like myself need to be mindful of that, so that way we are not speaking over them, or to make sure we aren't presenting information that contradicts the living practice. And frankly, it doesn't end there. Western practitioners should be aware of how capitalism has played a part. Their religion has been turned into a commodity. How do they feel about it? How has it impacted them? We must also remember that without ancestral and especially cultural roots, that we are not entitled to this religion. It is a privilege. Without this knowledge, your practice is incomplete. The list goes on, but I hope this covers the basics. A lot of people have a hard time trusting Set, but in studying to become a priestess, I see him as a protector above all things, and here's why. In pre-dynastic times, he was a protector of people in the night. He sometimes was seen not as an enemy of Heru, but as the counterbalance to him. In his own unique, violent way, he still upholds Ma'at. But as Kemet became more settled and civilized, he became associated with the things that they didn't like. He was always seen on the periphery of the deserts. He's also a protector of foreigners. He's also associated with riot and rebellion, which, as we all know, actually winds up being a response to systemic oppression and civil unrest. He's the person who's willing to do the dirty work that other people are afraid to do. But he actually aligns himself with Ra. He was specifically chosen by Ra to protect the Sunbark against the Nope Rope. He's chaotic, violent, and has his own morals. But above all, he is a protector. Hope that helps! So, you want to invite Set into your life? Here are a few offerings that might help. He loves hot, spicy food, particularly Flamin' Hot Cheetos and buffalo wings. His favorite food offering has been and always will be lettuce, particularly romaine or wild lettuce. Strawberries, served upside down. There's a story behind that. He loves red things. His favorite stone is red jasper. Knives and other sharp objects. You can honor him by taking care of your physical health. In my personal experience with him, I've learned that he is actually a huge Doctor Who fan. He really enjoys hard rock and heavy metal music. Also, he loves gaudy, blingy jewelry, especially if it's gold. Gold offerings, gold ornaments. He loves gold. And a great way to honor him is to honor and work with Ra as well. That's all I got time for. I hope that helps. Just in, Lord Set is extremely anti-fascist. I woke up this morning to a very dog-whistly comment on one of my videos about him, and instead of responding to that and winding up on that side of TikTok, I chose to make this video instead, my first 3-minute video. Now, I am somebody who talks to the gods all day. I'm a medium, some may even try to call me a seer, and I am training to become a priestess of Lord Set. But I still use history and research to ground myself into this physical reality. When I started working with Lord Set, I knew that the Hyksos, and the times in which that they were a part of Egypt, was a very important time for him. So I started trying to figure out who the Hyksos were. So with the help of the internet and some book learning, I got to working. Now, before this time, Lord Set had already become associated with the things that ancient Egypt just kinda didn't like. Illness, madness, confusion, the animals that they saw as dangerous, homosexual behaviors, and foreigners. Now, the Hyksos were a group of Semitic nomadic settlers who came in and occupied the Nile Delta. The Nile being the entire reason ancient Egypt was what it was. Many ancient Egyptians believed that their occupation threatened their way of life. And who was their patron? Lord Set. Now, I don't want to accidentally rewrite history. Some better studied people may chime in and prove me wrong. But I see the myths as man-made constructs. I believe the gods are real. But just like the Bible, the humans are the ones who wrote them down, as divinely inspired as they may have been. So researching the myths of the battle for the throne, or, Set killing Osiris and Set fighting Horus, some things just seemed a little influenced to me, such as the claim that Set killed Osiris purely out of jealousy. Now, this is a headcanon that I have yet to actually canonically prove, but I feel it is entirely possible that the actual reason that Osiris was killed by Set was because the patron of the pharaohs was letting the pharaohs get away with some fascist shit, particularly to the people he was sworn to protect. Because up until the time of the Hyksos, Set was still seen as somebody that upheld Ma'at, the guy that did the dirty work that nobody else wanted to do. Now I may be getting some sideways glances from some of my other fellow Kemetic pagans who may be seeing this, so please correct me if I'm off base here. But there seems to be continuous efforts to destroy his places of worship and demonize him in order to make him and the people who follow him just the worst possible people. Now, to tie this all off, I've read in several different places, and from people who appear to do their research, that the expulsion of the Hyksos are actually the real-life events that led to the stories of the Exodus. You know, Moses and the Red Sea? If this is true, it would suggest that up until that point, the people who fled during the Exodus were previously under Set's protection. So why would a god who once protected them want to help the people who swears to their genocide? Set is anti-fascist. Do I, Set?
Like my women like I like my lettuce. Green. No.
Uh-huh, I thought so. You know, my lord, if we're not careful, we're gonna accidentally start a lettuce cult. Oh, come on! You're the one who's turning it into content. Of course, you're the one who's putting the bait right in front of me. Okay, next point. How would we accidentally make a lettuce cult? Aren't those things a little, deliberate? Did you see the comments in the "it looked like lettuce leaf" video? It wouldn't take much. All it would take is a couple videos that went something like this. All hail the lettuce, food of our lord Sutekh. And that would be very deliberate. Okay, yeah, so I guess I just won't do that. Yeah, let's make sure it just stays a meme. Oh lord, I'm making lettuce memes with my god. Yeah, but hey, before we go... Yeah? Could you hand me my lettuce? There you go. Dude, Neith ain't nothing to fuck with. She's a war goddess who is a primordial creator, associated with weaving, including but not limited to weaving fate. Hell, some stories say that she even created Ra and the Nope Rope. Now, admittedly, I still don't know her well, but she's popped in here and there. But during the battle for the throne between Horus and Set, she actually sided with Set. That story came to a head when Horus and Set sort of tricked him. The version I'm familiar with is that Horus had put his seed in with Set's lettuce, Set's favorite food. Set served it to Sutekh, and from eating it, Set started withering away, just completely and utterly drained on all levels. To paraphrase the story, it was Neith who said, "You know, this has gone on long enough, Set is severely hurt now. Give Horus the throne, it's rightfully his, but make sure to accommodate Set with consolation prizes and healing." That's how I know Neith. Did somebody mention Set? If you haven't heard of them yet, go check out the Boofy system who made the original Stitch video. They've caught some attention recently for making the hashtag #WitchTalkHatesBrokePeople. Or was it poor people? That's not what brings me here today. What brings me here is Set's appearance. In the little text box where people usually put hashtag, they said something to the nature of "Set looks like a twink." That's right, a twink. And as Set's dedicated priestess who has spent a lot of time with him in the astral, I gotta say, they are absolutely correct. For context, this deity has been around me my entire life. When our former host Dahlia started seeing spirits, he was the first one that she saw. What she saw was a semi-slender, pale white-skinned, fiery crimson-haired Egyptian spirit. Based on that description, it was very difficult for me to be able to figure out that he was actually an Egyptian frickin' god. Then I realized that this spirit was Set, which being depicted with pale skin doesn't make sense for being an Egyptian deity. Then doing my research, I realized no, people depicted him with pale skin. Ivory white in some depictions. That being said, he is the only Neter depicted with white skin. Now, that does not make him white. Our modern conception of white usually translates to Eurocentric features, of which he has none. And as for the red hair, it is a little bit peculiar, but not entirely uncommon. Seti I and Ramses II aligned with him because they also had red hair, and they were pharaohs. Then to further this, in pre-dynastic era, he was also a nighttime deity, which would really indicate that he didn't see a lot of sunlight. But none of this means that he isn't an African god. He very much is. Part of his depiction has to do with being the archetypal other. He was traditionally associated with all of the things that Kemetic society really didn't like. In a society where a man is weighed by his ability to be a father, Set being both infertile as well as portraying and embodying rampantly bisexual behaviors, all of this is still absolutely in theme with what he represents. Now, he is also traditionally seen as one of, if not the most physically powerful Egyptian gods, which leads people to believe that he would be depicted as a muscular, bulking type of man, when simply I don't see him that way. Then again, rippling biceps don't really indicate how strong somebody is. Look at Bruce Lee, for example. He was toned and ripped, but he wasn't exactly large. And nobody questions how strong Bruce Lee was. To be completely honest, I see Set as fairly androgynous. Still masculine, absolutely, no question. So let's review the evidence. Being the archetypal outcast or other, canonically portraying homosexual behaviors, having a lean muscular build, being able to stand out in the middle of a crowd, having a reputation for liking gaudy blingy things, having a reputation for cross-dressing. Well, there you have it. Priestess of Set confirms. Set looks like a twink. Excuse me a moment, my lord. For the love of all of the gods, do not ever say that to his face. Ooh boy, the stress I'm under right now having just read that. No, I'm not gonna lie. It's hilarious. It's fucking funny. I get it. But we don't just say shit like that about Lord Set. Oh, I hear him. Thank God he's laughing. Okay, I guess you can say it. Just know it is incredibly inaccurate. I get that it is probably a joke. But don't ever try to assert that. Don't ask how I know. I will not elaborate. But his stories alone depict how inaccurate that is. Not quite. Not quite. I'm still not going to elaborate. But I love that the way that I imagined this. What I got was a scenario where I attempted, and then his reaction was like, no. But I like the cut of your jib, kid. I like your enthusiasm. You want to be my priestess? That is not what happened. But I love the scenario that my mind came up with. That was, beautiful. 'Cause he's hot? No, pardon me, I woke up, saw this. I just woke up, I'm having fun. But let's break that down. 1, it was just a meme, of which Lord Set is aware. 2, I made note that Lord Set laughed, because Lord Set has a great sense of humor. 3, the problem would be trying to enforce the idea that Lord Set is breedable and submissive. It won't work. Also, in this instance, they wouldn't be treating the entity as a fetish. They would be fetishizing the entity. Specifically because I said that he looks like a twink. That would speak more of the nature that this person likes twinks more than Lord Set. Also, people be frickin' deities, and deities be frickin' people. Myths and legends and lore is chock full of humans having sex with deities. All in all, that comment was harmless. What isn't harmless is thinking that Lord Set is just an entity. He's a god. Respect the drip. Okay, for real though, let's talk about this for a second. Because Lord Set has helped me understand all of his teachings and principles through understanding the Force. He came to me and I already understood the ways of the Force, if you will. Understanding that balance, that dichotomy, that black and white, the yin and yang. I learned early on that the light and the dark are neither good nor bad. They are two sides of the same coin. Without one, the other could not exist. Now, when we look at Star Wars, we see the Sith versus the Jedi. They are two warring religious orders. Neither one of them holds a monopoly on the understanding of one side of the Force or the other. They just have a diametric disagreement on how to utilize the Force. And because of centuries of bitter hatred, that perpetuates throughout the entire nonology. When in reality, the light and the dark are simply nature. We would not know light without darkness. We would not understand how good pleasure is if we didn't understand the pain that we felt. It is the utilization of either side of those sides of the Force that depict whether it's good or bad. How we see it in today's modern religion. Who here has a problem with modern Christianity? Who here has a absolute awful taste in their mouth by some practitioners' strict, forced adherence to either the threefold law or insisting that love and light is the only way. Me? Now, in my personal understanding, when it comes to Lord Set, he is the Sith Lord. One of the things he most often in common represents is necessary chaos. The first thing that he taught me was that destruction is the first step of creation. Without destroying what was, we cannot be able to grow from what we had. Over time, he became associated with Isfet, which is the imbalance when the scales of Ma'at are not in harmony. Then we go back in time to pre-dynastic era. He represented the nighttime sky. He represented darkness. He was the counterbalance to Horus the Elder or Heru-Ur, who represented the daytime sky and the light. But there must be a balance between the night and the day, even on levels that associate with our very ecosystem. The two must exist in the same space, but they only ever are connected by the middle ground. Which is why Lord Set is also associated with riot, rebellion, protest. He is also often associated with being the primordial embodiment of corruption. But now with all of these things in place, we gotta ask, what is it he's corrupting? He corrupts the status quo. He corrupts societal norms and expectations. And he has always stood in direct opposition to oppressive forces and tyrannical regimes. But he does this by corrupting what is, so that new things can grow. He was also known to protect foreigners. He protected the people that suffered at the hands of systemic oppression. He is anger, he is chaos, he is rage. He is the violent enforcer of the dark side of the Force. He is the necessary counterbalance to the light. Duaset! Oh, my dear sweet summer child, I am the lettuce cult. Just because I don't like the taste doesn't mean that I haven't found many other useful uses for lettuce. Now, one of the many useful uses is for a sleeping potion. If you are using romaine or wild lettuce, you may come to find that the insides are nice and juicy. You see that good splatter? This juicy substance in the center of the lettuce can be used for sleeping brews. It's also been seen as a cure for infertility and to boost one's virility. It can also be used for banishing. Just pick up your lettuce and throw it at the entity's head. This may also work on physical opponents, but more or less to surprise them and give yourselves a couple of seconds because you just threw lettuce at their head. But in all seriousness, if you take the lettuce, dip it in just a little bit of water, you can sprinkle it around. And if Lord Set is on your team, it can work as a banishing. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have offerings to replace. Don't worry, I had permission for this. Huh. Looks like somebody really didn't like the fact that I took the time to confirm that Lord Set looks like a twink. Also, really, TikTok? 2 takedowns equals getting blocked for 5 days. 4 days. Now, I'm not sure what does it for me more. It could be the blatant unwillingness to take what I said and then do further research. But I think really what does it for me is the obvious homophobia. You don't want to see Lord Set as a twink, that's fine. But if one were to also do the research, it is easy to suggest that my suggestions are not unfounded. The Egyptian gods are African gods. There are stories of Sutekh topping or doming Horus the Elder, as well as Horus the Younger. Just remember, they're 2 separate beings. However, we can't take away the fact that it is recorded that Set said to Horus the Younger mid-coitus, "Oh, how wonderful your backside is." He protects the LGBTQ because he is one. He is one of us. Which was ridiculed and frowned upon in a society where they weighed a man by his ability to bear a family, of which Set could not because he was infertile as well. Just like the red sands of the outskirts of Egypt, which he protected Egypt on all sides. The color of the sand is reflected in his hair, his red hair. In multiple places, Set is depicted with either pale skin or a white face. That does not make him white. Egypt was famously referred to as Kemet, properly, I should say, which means land of black soil. The black soil was the fertile soil on the banks of the Nile. Set is referred to as the true black because she is truly fertile. Before Asar, or Osiris, was the patron of the pharaohs, he was an agriculture god. He is depicted with black and green skin to reflect this. So Set being depicted with white skin does not mean he's not an African god, and it does not mean that he is white. It further puts him in the position of being infertile. Now, if the way that you see, envision, or communicate with Set is different than this depiction, that is also okay. But it is not purely my gnosis that I was suggesting the way that I see him. I was saying that my research verified it. That being said, I'm going to take this time being banned by backing them up onto a YouTube channel, so others can continue.
But since there's so many people out there who need to hear it, stop saying Jesus is Horus!
One more time for my side of TikTok. Quit saying Jesus is Horus! This idea is a complete fabrication. Back in the late 1800s, a Christian poet by the name of Gerald Massey deliberately set out to find similarities between the Egyptian myths and the gospel. The fun thing is that it wasn't very difficult for him to do, because so many of the Egyptologists that were out there excavating were doing the exact same thing. That particular Egyptology rush deliberately carved the Egyptian gods away from Egypt. And this was one of the ways that they did that. And they did this further by carving Egypt away from the rest of Africa. And in spite of the better knowledge and information that we have about Egypt and ancient Kemet now, no matter how many times this idea gets debunked, for some dumb reason it still persists. This is 100% because of the Zeitgeist films. Those Zeitgeist movies were loved by so many different groups of people, such as conspiracy theorists, ancient astronaut theorists, and the New Age Love and Light movement. And if you haven't noticed, these same groups all funnel into the same pipeline because this idea is convenient for their own narratives. However, most of the people that share this idea don't even realize that there are two Horuses. There's Heruwir, who is Horus the Elder. Then there's Heru Sa Aset, also known as Horus the Younger, who is the offspring of Isis. And because of this silly little theory, people have tried to find common threads between Isis and the Virgin Mary. Let me tell you something. Isis wasn't a virgin. In spite of Osiris's dangly bits not being accounted for when she and Nebutet reconstructed Osiris's body, she fashioned a new one in order to conceive Horus. This is an unfounded idea that needs to be put to rest. Because if you do a day's worth of research, you will find out that every single point to equate Horus to Jesus is completely fabricated. This idea holds absolutely zero weight and has no legs to stand on. So if you are one of these people, knock it the fuck off. Sutekh. I haven't talked about Set in a while. One of the things that I set out to do working with him was to dispel the myth that Set is also Satan. Based in my time working with Samael, I am ready to help dispel some of those myths. Throughout my videos in the past, I have spoken about Set at great lengths. I have studied and researched him to see how he was seen in ancient Egypt. And I mean ancient Egypt. He is a nighttime deity, a protector of foreigners and the LGBTQ. He can be seen as an adversarial force, but this is because of his role as a necessary counterbalance. At the end of the day, he is accurately an anti-hero. The guy who's brash and bold enough to do the work necessary to get dirty jobs done. Part of the reason he is painted so negatively today is because of his time as the patron of the Hyksos. The Hyksos were a group of Semitic nomadic settlers who settled around the Nile of the Delta. This threatened the way of life of Egypt. Over the course of about 100 years, myths, stories, and history took place and were created in order to forcefully push the Hyksos out. So Kemet actively demonized their own god, destroying his temples, defacing his statues, and destroying his place of worship. Let's take a look at the word Satan. Satan is a title, one that was bestowed upon Samael. Now, he is not the only Satan. There are other Satans who work underneath him to do his work. His role is to tempt mankind away from the path of God. Hasatan means the accuser, could also mean the prosecutor. Satan does not mean adversary or opposer. It later came to mean those things because of the title that was bestowed upon Samael, who he was the opposer and the adversary to the plan and divinity of God. These two beings are not the same. They have different cultural origins, different cultural contexts. Set existed in Egypt long before Samael existed as we know him. Now I gotta wonder, how many paths, how many traditions, how many belief structures have been built around Set or have been built that include Set based on the idea that he himself is also Satan? For that, I cannot answer, but one stands out, and that is the Temple of Set. That's a video in and of itself, and I don't mean to come for an entire group of people, especially an initiatory order that I only know so little about. But if I understand correctly, their belief is that Set is also Satan, as he was worshipped under another name in Egypt. Ultimately, believe what you want, but beliefs like that have no cultural or historical standing to stand upon or be supported by. And any Kemetic will tell you the same. Set is not Satan. I'm gonna catch shit for this one. I wanna give credit where credit is due. I respect Aquino for walking away from the Church of Satan when he felt it wasn't right anymore, and he went off to do his own thing. I got respect for that. Also, their take on vampirism is mostly positive, self-empowering even. But let me tell you this right now. If Dr. Michael Aquino had walked into this community today saying and proclaiming that Set was the same as Satan, he would have been told to take that idea and shove it right up his unverified personal gnosis. And now he's created an entire religion out of it. And I am somebody who is very close to and admires Sutekh greatly. And boy, I don't want to be that person who's being gatekeepy or anything like that. But I do not believe, had there been proper context given for Set at that time, anybody would have ever thought for a second that Set and Satan were the same. It astounds me to no end. Sometimes I get a little treat reminding me why I'm alive. One of those reasons is to spite God. Really? Calling my guy the Antichrist? Let's go over once again why New Age spirituality is a spiritual eugenics cult, okay? First of all, the Antichrist is an invention of the modern church. A boogeyman to watch out for, to be the face of end times. And you know, I'm not going to erase history and act like Set hasn't done some nefarious shit. But let's take a look at history. Early Egypt. Back then it was called Kemet. It wasn't Egypt until the Romans started writing history. And every empire has fetishized Rome since. But back then, Set was a deity who was a nighttime deity. He was the nighttime sky. The counterbalance to Heruwir, also known now as Horus the Elder. Aside from his devious characterizations, he protected people in the night. He protected foreigners and weary travelers. He's also a protector of foreigners. Originally, this represented balance. Heruwir, the light in the daytime sky, and Sutekh, the darkness in the nighttime sky. Then at some point, light was associated with good, and dark was associated with bad. But Set was still the patron of Upper Egypt, which on a map now would look like Southern Egypt. However, it was Sutekh and Heruwir together who elevated an agriculture god into the position of the patron of a united Egypt. This patron, Wasir, who we now know as Osiris. Wasir sometimes is credited as being the one who taught humans how to till the Nile and make crops. Eventually, he would be wed to Osset, who we now know as Isis. Together, they protected the people of Egypt and ensured a balance of Ma'at, which originally was a cosmic balance that led to harmony. Eventually, Ma'at became a political tool to ensure and enforce an ideal of order in Kemet. Even in this time, Set was a protector of Egypt, a necessary evil who was above all else a protector. He protected Egypt on all sides, amongst the red sands, which were as infertile as he was. Enter the Hyksos, a group of people who were once allies to Kemet, and then were forcibly pushed out. Set was their patron, and Set was further demonized. People write the story now that Set was insanely jealous. Nephthys had a child with Wasir. But Set could not provide offspring, so Nephthys went to Wasir. pretending to be her twin sister, Set. Set felt betrayed by his wife, of course. But Wasir was also letting the pharaohs get away with a bunch of fascist shit to justify the cruelty of the Hyksos, the people he was sworn to protect. Sutekh killed Wasir and took the throne in hopes to restore balance, which was literally his job. The necessary chaos and rebellion. He who incites the riot. Riot is often, most commonly, a response to civil unrest. Set and Nephthys pieced Wasir back together just long enough so that he could bear an offspring. And eventually, Horus, the younger... Do I make this video? I'm gonna make this video. This is a comment left on one of my videos about Akati. But this is describing Nephthys, aka Nephthys, Nebetit, or Nebtet. This is Sutekh's wife. Or some people believe that they are divorced. Based on my experience working with them at the same time, I'd suggest they're divorced. Also very interesting because I just recently started working with Nebetet instead of Akati. I came to realize I've been working with Nebetet and thinking it was Akati for a long time. Don't know how long, but based on their characterizations and their energies, they are similar. Annie, remarkably. I'd suggest people get the two of them confused frequently. Now, I don't want to suddenly start advocating for the syncretizing of deities now, but let's note the similarities. They're both strongly associated with the underworld. They're both all about transformation, transition, and metamorphosis. Particularly with Nephthys, the transition from life into death, as well as embalming and mummification. One of the main differences is that Hecate is not limited to her chthonic aspects. Then again, Nephthys isn't really either. They're both worshipped primarily within the home. Both preside over unconventional justice. When the justice system has failed, they step in. Nephthys is overshadowed by her twin sister Set a lot. Nephthys is equally as powerful. Now coming back to this. In Kemet, following the travel of Ra's sun bark into the night is a big deal. That when night falls and the sun goes down, that Ra has died. Ra is the sun, but also is not. Definitely is. Helios is the sun. Ra is a little bit different than that. Either way, when we follow Ra into the underworld, or the Duat, we see all 12 houses, hours, or sections, however you want to call it. And Nephthys, alongside Set or Isis, protects Ra along the Duat. Now, Sutekh protects the bark against the Nope Rope, Apophis. I'm not going to say its kinetic name. But there are countless dangers throughout the Duat that from. So there are many other deities that accompany Ra along the travel through the Duat. Is Nephthys. But in this comment, it's being attributed to Hecate. The similarities continue to grow deeper. Or this factoid was falsely attributed with Hecate, but it's actually Nephthys. By the way, I'm not going to suddenly start saying, oh, they're the same. I've been working with Nephthys for about 2 or 3 months now, believing that it was Hecate. I was fooled. It was very humbling for me. I'm going to say not the same, but really similar. It ain't always easy telling the difference between Hecate and Nephthys. I've been working with both of them and not realizing it. Then I realized there was 2 of them. Then I started to feel like Oron High School Host Club. One of us is Hikaru, one of us is Karu. Bet you can't tell the difference. And at the time, I couldn't. Until Hecate stepped away recently and left Nephthys in charge. Then I started realizing the times that it was Nephthys and not Hecate. Then Hecate comes back to check in on me. Same old song and dance. One of us is Hikaru, one of us is Karu. But this time I was prepared. I see Nephthys with straight hair. I see Hecate with wavy hair. Nephthys looks exactly like Set. Hecate looks similar but more like cousins. Also, Hecate asks for wine offerings. Nephthys asks for bourbon and cigarettes. Also, Hecate is big Scorpio energy. Nephthys is big Cancer energy in mourning, but overall a big personality. Both water signs, but not the same. Also, Nephthys is never in the same room as Set. So there you have it. Do with this UPG as you will. Yeah, I left that video a little open-ended. So let's focus on Nephthys. That way you can tell if it's her or not. Nephthys, goddess of the dead, goddess of darkness and the night. She's also associated with the decaying flesh of the dead, which goes hand in hand with her association with vultures. Another bird she's associated with is the hawk and sometimes the falcon. She is the mother of Anubis. She is also a goddess of embalming and mummification. She is the one who pieced the body of Wazir back together as Set went and collected the pieces of his body. She focuses on the more morbid, grotesque aspects of death. All things dark, spooky, dead, decaying, dying. Stones she's associated with are obsidian and amethyst. She's associated with poisonous animals. More so, the medicinal aspects and potentials of the venom of animals. She is Sorceress Supreme. Hope this helps. Nephthys is metal as fuck. She's the mourner of the dead. She sees all of the brutal aspects of death that don't get romanticized. She sees what the dead go through from the point of death until they've moved on. She has zero tolerance for those who disrespect the dead or those who desecrate the sacredness of death. She is very loving and exceptionally compassionate. But she has got to be the scariest goddess I have ever worked with. Because once you cross one of those lines, she is very hex first, ask questions later. Also, she either is or was married to Set. And it takes a unique type of person to keep him pleased. She's also Anubis' mom. She birthed and raised Anubis. And as fierce as Anubis is, he has patience that she does not. She is just as powerful as a Set, her twin. When she first approached me, I thought she was Lilith. And I know we don't care for J.K. Rowling anymore, but if Nephthys were sorted into a Hogwarts house, she'd undoubtedly be a Slytherin. Also Anubis' mom. She birthed and raised Anubis. And as fierce as Anubis...
So that is in some tellings, the one that I personally believe, but there are, tellings out there where Anubis spawned, right after Ra. But I personally do believe that Nephthys is his mom. And I will say this right now. He absolutely loves her. Nothing but good vibes all around, loves her. She is amazing. However, I full-heartedly believe that she was the one who taught him how to skin a certain god and wear their pelt. So yeah, you don't piss off Nephthys. She is, as Darren said, just as powerful as Set. And in my opinion, she's a little bit more vindictive. She's not afraid to play the long game, because you will be dealing with her sooner or later. It doesn't matter to her. After all, she is the goddess who receives and consoles the dead. She's also the goddess who says if you are or aren't a priest.
When it comes to respecting the dead, and what specifically incurs the wrath of Nephthys, I'm going to say that you are well within your rights to talk smack about your abusers once they've passed on. But I'm going to go on with adding context to explain why. The worship of Nephthys was often found within an individual household. She granted protection to all of the children in a home, and she protected specifically the head woman of every household. So if a woman was abused, and Nephthys could not protect that woman, she would definitely make sure that their abuser faced justice. Individually or alongside a Set, they both presided over justice. They are often seen in duality with one another, and they both abided by the cosmic law of Ma'at. So a Set can sometimes be seen building or creating a case, and Nephthys is the one who executes the punishment. Now, when it comes to funeral or burial rites, it was believed that everybody was allotted a ceremonious burial, which would include mummification and embalming. But not every person and family had the ability to afford that luxury. So a proper burial is very important to Nephthys. So taking care of the body from death until burial is her realm, and making sure that everything is put in order for the burial. This is oftentimes where she's seen in tandem with her husband Sutekh. Sutekh was often a patron of poor people. During certain periods, Kemet was not kind to the poor, and Sutekh accepted everybody. So Sutekh wound up being the patron for a lot of people who were outcast and outsiders, which included the poor, the people who could not afford proper burial rites. So it is oftentimes said that Sutekh, with Nephthys, would ensure a favorable afterlife for the people who were devoted to them, regardless of that fact. So let's go back over it. Nephthys cares about justice. She cares about the dead. So I feel like the line that she would draw is desecrating the dead body, and she would either prevent or punish somebody if they were to deliberately thwart the proper burial rites of an individual. Now, once a person is properly embalmed, taken care of, and buried, they then are able to enter the Duat, or the underworld. From there, they are tried, they are judged, and if need be, they are sentenced. Something that Anubis specifically presides over is the weighing of the heart. Before entering an eternal rest, The heart of an individual was weighed on a scale, and it was weighed against one of the feathers of Ma'at, which is cosmic balance and harmony. This feather is represented by an ostrich feather. The heart was believed to hold all of the evil deeds done by a person. The more evil a heart, the heavier it weighed. So if on the scale Anubis weighed a heart and it was heavier than one of those feathers of Ma'at, that heart was then fed to Ammit. And once Ammit devoured a heart, that soul was annihilated. Oblivion. Gone. That person no longer exists. So abusing somebody? Definitely something that would make the heart way heavier. Either way, your abuser's been taken care of. Okay, I've tried filming this one a couple of times, but every time I do, I realize something is a little wrong with it. So bear with me, this isn't going to be perfect. Does guilt or remorse affect the way that your heart will be weighed after you've died and entered the Dawat, when Anubis weighs your heart on a set of scales against a feather of Ma'at? The answer is, it depends. But I will say that guilt and remorse alone probably aren't enough. But in order to answer this and bring a better understanding, I have to try to explain what Ma'at is. Now, others have different takes, so please allow yourself to consider what others have to say about it. Ma'at is a universal balance. Ma'at is cosmic order. Ma'at does not care about your feelings. Ma'at does not care if you are guilty, remorseful, or proud of your actions. To say that Ma'at represents harmony is a misunderstanding, because Ma'at accounts for both harmony and chaos. Now, the antithesis of Ma'at would be Isfet, which is not chaos. Isfet is imbalance. So the question I would ask is, how much Isfet have you brought into the world? Do you hold yourself accountable and take responsibility for a said Isfet that you've brought into the world? And it doesn't matter which side of the force, if you will, you align yourself with. Because too much of the light will bring Isfet. Too much of the dark will bring Isfet. Too much harmony, too much chaos, too much of something will bring Isfet into the world. Understanding this also helped me to understand Sutekh. Set is a nighttime deity that represents darkness and necessary chaos. He brings that chaos that is necessary, because without that chaos, Isfet will still be brought into the world. Now, there are the 42 ideals of Ma'at, which is a code of conduct. It's a code of ethics. But ultimately, the 42 ideals of Ma'at are guidelines. But the 42 ideals of Ma'at themselves do not represent Ma'at. They are suggestions for a way one can live that will guide them to live a life in accordance with Ma'at. So if throughout your life you brought in a lot of Isfet into the world, there are things you can do that will help restore Ma'at. But essentially, it is very nuanced. There really isn't a cut and dry answer, which is why everybody's heart gets weighed. Because Ma'at holds both sides of the force, if you will, accountable. Death is the great equalizer. We will all be greeted by death someday. So in my practice, being a Kemetic practitioner, I am constantly asking myself, in what ways am I impacting the world? In what ways, good, bad, or ugly, are my actions affecting the world around me? What Isfet have I brought into the world? And is there something I can do to render that null? Ultimately, it's hard to say what things are going to make our hearts weigh heavier. Hope this helps. Now, let me read that a little more clearly. That is, how are you going to be a white super sissy, or a group of white super sissies, while worshipping an African god? And I don't care if Set is depicted with ivory white skin. He's an African god. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal practice in Kemeticism. I've been converting for about 4 months, and it's taken a lot of work to get here. I worked with Set as a spirit guide before I even knew who the hell he was. And some of the main things that I focused on with him was ancestor work. And I can sit here and preach all day about I'm mixed race, but I'm still half white. I had to find a way to personally reconcile that my ancestors were both the colonizers and the colonized. I was on here calling myself a priestess of Set. Nephthys is the one that stepped in and said, hey, you're using that title incorrectly. And that meant I had to take the L. And if I have learned anything while studying Kemeticism, is that it is extremely difficult to be a spiritual tourist, if you will, and properly work with the Neter. And I am not about to be that person saying that you can't work with them eclectically. And trust me, I've heard it all. Egypt was multi-ethnic, and that may be true. but it's still an African religion with African roots, and the pantheon is completely comprised of African gods. Now, the way that I practice, there is a lot of ancestor veneration, which means I work with my ancestors, and I also work with ancestors who are Kemetic, which means I am working with ancestors that are not my own. I don't think the general Western population understands quite how badly the gods in the practice have been taken out of context. And even though I myself am mixed race, look at me, I look white. That means I need to be mindful about the way that I'm talking about this religion. I need to be mindful of the way that I am talking about these gods publicly. Because I know people are going to listen to me before they listen to the people of color who are actually of the culture. So now that I'm seeing this, white supremacy in the name of Lord Sutekh, suffice it to say I've been choosing my words very carefully in this video. Honestly, at this point, I don't even know what to say on that. Just how the fuck are you going to use an African god as a tool for white supremacy? If anybody ever wonders why some people would want Kemeticism to be closed and remain closed, that's it, right there. In my research and my experience, I am not aware of any other popular pantheon that has been stripped down and bastardized the way that the Egyptian gods have. Every pantheon has faced demonization and appropriation. But boy, let me tell you, there is something special about the way that others bastardize this faith. And this is a prime example of that. Thank you. Did you want to learn more? Okay. Her name, Nebutet, is sometimes seen translated as Lady of the House. But Nebet refers to a head woman in charge. And Het refers specifically to a temple or a palace. So a better translation for her name might actually be Headmistress of the Temple. She is referred to as Friend of the Dead. She greets all people at the time of death. She helps comfort and console during the time of dying. She helps with the process of death, dying, and moving on. She's also referred to as the goddess of the end, for she is at the end of all things, the end of sorrow and heartache, the end of life. She consoles women during childbirth, so she is at the end of pregnancy as well. She is at the end of all that is known, and she can be found in the liminal space where one thing ends and another begins. When I learned that is when I realized she's the Kemetic Grim Reaper. She can also be worshipped during dusk and dawn, the times when the day or the night end. Duaheteru. This tidbit of information right here is actually how I already knew what Het meant in regards to Nebutet. I often get the question, how many other Neteru have showed up? Or something like that. And the answer is, a lot of them. This includes Hathor. Now, honestly, I don't know a whole lot about Hathor, other than bits and pieces of questionable myths with questionable origins, and a lot of those stories would suggest that Hathor and Sekhmet are two aspects of the same goddess. Which is honestly a really cool take that I like, but I don't have enough information to pass it off as fact. But my experience with Hathor is that she is one of the few that will step in and help, at least for the way that I'm practicing and learning, and every time she has, it has been a blessing. In my experience, she has been nothing but kind and gentle and compassionate, and also extremely protective. But yeah, it just goes to show that learning the actual Egyptian names of these gods, one to understand them a lot better. I want to respond to this comment. It was left out of video about Kemeticism and its bastardization that has now made it possible for Lord Set to be used as a tool for white supremacy. This isn't wrong, but in my research, leaving it at that isn't enough. First thing I do is I would suggest this and replace it with people using Christianity as a tool has warped the view of the gods. Now we're putting the blame on people. We are holding people responsible and the way that they weaponize a religion. But in the context of Kemeticism and the Kemetic gods, in my research, Christianity is actually not the biggest hurdle that we face, at least as Western Reconstructionists. First, we gotta understand Western esotericism and how we got here, and just how much of it is completely built by white supremacy. So if you come to Lord Set as a Western esotericist who has not done their research, that's going to paint your understanding. But my biggest grievances in this context will always be put on New Age spirituality and the ancient astronaut theory. Contemporary spiritualism, or what we know as modern spirituality, has taken so many things, such as reincarnation, chakras, and they've pulled so many different practices from so many different cultures and so many different religions into one weird melting pot, that in order for it to fit into one worldview, they had to destroy it and rebuild it into a way that they saw fit. Now, with ideas such as the ancient astronaut theory, they are able to place the gods amongst the ranks of extraterrestrials, saying that the gods are here for everybody. But now, no matter what culture or spiritual belief you come from, if it is through a new age lens, it's already been appropriated. It's already been bastardized. People believe that the Neteru, or the Neter, the Kemetic gods, are extraterrestrials that come from a star system within the Orion constellation. What this winds up doing is it completely erases the history of ancient Egypt. Because now instead of giving credit to the people, the humans who were here, that credit is now given to gods who are extraterrestrials. And now all of it can fit into some weird constructed worldview. History gets erased, cultures get blended, and a lot of the theories that are perpetuated within New Age spirituality started off as white supremacist propaganda. Now, the ancient astronaut theory isn't a product of that, but it did lend to pre-existing white supremacist propaganda. Now, Christianity does play a part in this, because Christian scholars and archaeologists were the ones who were present during the Egyptology boom of the 1800s and 1900s. So Egypt was carved away from Africa in order to fit a Christian world sphere. All of this is part of the problem. The Kemetic pantheon is absolutely okay with trans people. Many of the Neteru have both male and female aspects. Some suggest that Seshat is another aspect of Nephthys, but it's entirely more likely that Seshat is a female aspect of Thoth, properly known as Jehudi. There are gods like Hapi, who has both male and female body parts. We may refer to him now as intersex. Now, I don't know if Egypt had a trinary gender system, but the Neteru were also worshipped in Nubia, who did have a trinary system. Neteru are cool with most of the alphabet mafia. Lord Set is proudly bisexual, having coupled with Horus the Younger on several documented occasions. There's also a shared personal gnosis that Lord Set sometimes dresses in drag. It's my personal gnosis that Ra is ace. Ancient Egypt didn't always look kindly on homosexuality, but the Neteru don't mind at all. Hey, let's talk about that thing. My name is Melanie, and I have become known recently for talking about demons. But at the end of the day, I am a Kemetic practitioner. And it has been known to me since day one that the snake is one of the only things to be feared. The snake is not a god. The snake is a being of pure chaos and destruction. It devours and consumes everything. And it has one goal in mind. Return everything to nothingness. Or return everything to the primordial waters of Nun. If you have seen the Loki show on Disney+, it is very similar to Alioth. Now, when we write its name, why do we write it like this where it's chopped up? Because to speak or write its name invokes it to wherever you are. And even the smallest fraction of its true self destroys everything it touches. This is why we use euphemisms to refer to it. It is the sworn enemy of Ra. It lurks in the darkest parts of the Duat, waiting for its chance to attack and kill Ra. Why? Because if it were to destroy Ra, that would destroy all life on Earth. If this thing were successful to destroy Ra, all things would cease to grow. And that is exactly why it wants to kill Ra. It is the enemy of life. Now, every night, Ra descends into the Duat, or the underworld. When he does so, he is dead. This is why Ra needs several of the Neter to protect him while he is dead. And the biggest threat is the snake. Ra chose Sutekh specifically to protect the sunbark against the snake. because Sutekh is the most physically powerful of all of the Neteru. But even so, Sutekh still needs the help of Heruir, otherwise known as Horus the Elder, Osset, and Nebetet, as well as a few other trained priestesses who subdue this thing. That way they may protect Ra from it. And by protecting Ra against the snake, they are in turn protecting all life on Earth. That is this thing's objective. Consume, destroy, and devour all things living. Its objective is to undo all of creation. When it was drawn on temple walls, they drew it in broken up pieces for the same reason we break up its name. Because to draw it, write it, or speak it brings it into our world. So we avoid these things at all costs. It is not a misunderstood cuddly snake. It is Isfet. It is the worst thing out there. Respecting that Kemetic faith is an African religion. Alright, I'm a little more than peeved right now. On that video just now, I received this comment. Ain't no human going to tell me what I can or cannot do due to some sense of pushing their own opinion on others. If you watched that video and that is what you took from that, then literally, that is not the problem. Now, I uploaded that video somewhere in the course of July, I think. Since then, I have been all over the place. I've talked about psychic vampires, I've talked about demons, I tried figuring out who Lucifer really is. And as it stands today, it would appear that there is no religion that has not been bastardized, whitewashed, misrepresented, or appropriated in some way to some extent. But boy, the exceptions that people make for Kemeticism and the Kemetic gods is astronomical. People think that the Neteru are literal extraterrestrials. When I was making those videos, do you understand how many people were in my DMs trying to convince me that they were literally one of these gods incarnate? The way that Kemeticism has been completely appropriated and turned into some weird fascination with a New Age spirituality. And there is always going to be somebody out there that is of the belief that some of the demons of the Goetia are one and the same as the Neteru, when that is demonstrably false with the right research. At some point, I realized that my videos on the topic were also becoming part of the problem, especially when I was parading around calling myself a priestess of Set. Eventually, I decided that I myself could not handle this, and I walked away from it entirely. In other words, I took my own advice from that video. I am not going to stop anybody from working with the gods of Kemet eclectically. There is no problem with learning and appreciating the culture. People are going to continue working with the nope rope, and there's nothing I can do about it. But there is cultural, religious, historical context, as well as geographical context that is going to be required in order for anybody to understand these gods or the faith or the religion in any way, shape, or form accurately. Kemeticism is going to be misunderstood if you are not going about it in a particular way with a certain understanding. But you want to know what? Nowhere else on my entire page are you going to find entitled bullshit like this being spewed forth from people's fingertips than on my videos on Kemeticism. Call it gatekeeping if you want. But nothing is going to change the fact that that attitude is exactly the problem. You are who that video was gatekeeping from.